Once again, we're in 3ds Max 2020 and you'll notice that we've got a blank screen. We haven't imported anything yet. We're still going through that setting things up to import into 3ds Max. Now, just to throw another spanner in the works, there are two ways that you can bring your AutoCAD drawing into 3ds Max. Now, whilst this might seem a little bit, okay, why are there two? Why is that confusing? They're not confusing if you know what each one does. So let's have a little look at those. I'm just going to go through them with you before we actually go and find our DWG file and bring it into 3ds Max. It's very quick and easy. You go up to File here at the top left-hand corner there, and you can see that we've got Import and Export. Now, if you hover over Import, you can see there that you can import a file and you can also link an AutoCAD file. There's other file formats as well, though. There's things like FBX, and also Revit files can be brought into 3ds Max now as well. Now, if you link your AutoCAD file, what will happen there is it links to the file, and any changes made to the DWG will reflect in 3D Studio Max. So if somebody changed the drawing, our transitional drawing that we're bringing in, the changes would reflect in 3D Studio Max when we open up that scene again. So importing is very quick and easy. An import, you just literally select import and you can select which file to import. Obviously you can see ours is there. It's a DWG, that's what we're going to bring in. That's our transitional 3D ground floor DWG file that we created previously. But I just want to show you here as well, if you go to all formats, there's so many different formats that you can bring into 3ds Max. There's a lot of them, and they all come from various different applications, products, etc. So just be aware of that. There's a lot of file types that you can bring in if you need to. That's the benefit of 3ds Max. It's much, much more versatile because you can bring in all different types of 3D models and even just 2D drawings into the 3ds Max environment to give it that photorealistic render with all the materials and the lighting and so on. So I'm just going to hit escape there a couple of times, and we're just going to go back to the file again just to reiterate. So file here, and if you want to import, you can just do a straight import, which is a snapshot in time. So basically what will happen there is you'll just get that one-off import. Any changes to the DWG file will not be reflected in that import. If you link the AutoCAD file, changes will reflect in 3ds Max if any changes are made to the DWG file that you're bringing in to the scene in 3ds Max. Just so you're aware of that. And I want to stress that because it's really important which one you choose depending on what you want to do with the DWG file. At this point in time, you're probably thinking, when is he actually going to bring in the DWG file into 3ds Max? Well, that's what we're going to do now. But before we do that, we need to go through a number of settings in the dialog box when we import the file. Now, in this particular instance, we're just going to import. I'm not too worried about linking the DWG file to the scene in 3ds Max. There's no real need to worry about that at all. This is such a simple example that we don't need to worry. But obviously, if your working environment requires you to link it, please do. The link is then there, and what happens, as I've said previously, any changes to the DWG will reflect in the scene in 3ds Max. So we're going to go up to File now, and we're going to locate our drawing file. So we come in here and we go to Import, and I'm going to do a straight import like that. I hit Import there, and what will happen now is it will go to the dialog box saying Select File to Import. Now just be really careful here, because there's a little history bar here. Keep an eye on that as you work in 3ds Max, because you'll notice there, history, import. When you import the file, the DWG file, there's an import folder where it actually allows you to see where those files are imported into 3ds Max. It's useful. Just keep an eye on that history. It's really useful just to go back and find something if you need to. So you can see there that I've got the 3D ground floor.dwg file. It tells me it's an AutoCAD drawing and it gives me the file size, the usual drill in a dialog box. And as I've already specified to you, there's so many different file formats down here. So we're just literally going to select 3D ground floor.dwg like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on Open. Now, as soon as we do that, you get this rather complex looking dialog box. Now, don't stress about it. There's a lot of things in here that you do not need to change whatsoever. You can leave them all at the default settings, especially for such a simple example as what we have here as well, our little sort of box room kind of idea with the walls, the door, the window, etc. Now, we need to have a look at different settings in this particular dialog box. And what I want to do is break them down video by video, because that way you can then jump back to each video and check what you're doing is correct. So you should have that dialog box open now. It should say at the top, AutoCAD DWG/DXF import options, and you should be able to see your DWG file name at the top of the dialog box like so. So what we'll do now, we'll move on to the next video and we'll go down through this dialog box piece by piece. As I said in the previous video, we're going to go through the AutoCAD DWG DXF import options dialog box piece by piece. Now, the reason I'm doing that is just to make sure that you've got a point of reference for each aspect of the dialog box. Rather than jump into it all in one video, it then gives you a nice little point of reference for each aspect of the dialog box that you can refer to. If I do all of this as one video, you're going to have to keep rewinding all the time. At least this way, you can just jump into each video and check the part of the dialog box that you need to check. Just thought that would be a lot easier for you. So, first thing we're going to look at is the units. Now, you'll remember previously we set up the units, didn't we? We set the system units and also the display units in 3dsMax. Now, if they're already set, you don't need to worry about your incoming file units here, model scale. And you'll notice that's defaulting to millimeters anyway, and it's grayed out. Now, the reason it's grayed out is because we haven't clicked the rescale tick box here. Now, ticking that box allows it to rescale to millimeters. Now, we don't need to worry about that. Our system units are millimeters, our display units are millimeters. We've done all that already. But just refer back to what I said previously in some of the previous chapters and videos. Remember that default setting for 3dsMax when you first install it is inches. So you would use perhaps rescale if you needed to bring an imperial drawing into 3dsMax but make it into millimeters. So we don't need to worry about that. We can simply untick that. We know that everything is millimeters anyway. Everything's coming in millimeters. The DWG file is in millimeters. So we're covered. It's all metric millimeters. We're good. Millimeters to go, as they say. So we're fine. We're absolutely fine. So we don't need to worry about any of our units there at all. Now, just looking below that, you've got the resulting model size, which obviously refers back to the units as well. So at the moment, it's saying, hang on a minute, drawing extents not known. So we don't need to worry about that either because it's such a simple model that we're using. It's really small and it's just coming straight in from that really simple 2D drawing. However, if you were bringing in big files, 3D files, say from Revit or from AutoCAD, you might need to worry about that resulting model size. It could be really big, and you want to make sure that you can see all of that in 3dsMax. So just be aware of that and keep an eye on that as well. But at the moment, we've done the sanity check on the units. They're all good to go. Once again, we're back with our AutoCAD DWG DXF import options dialog box in 3dsMax. Now, in the previous video, we talked about our units, sanity checking our units, making sure they were doing what they should be doing. We've done that now. That's good. So we're moving down to the next section in the dialog box, which is derive AutoCAD primitives by. Now, there's a big drop-down list here. There's lots of bits and pieces in there that obviously might not mean anything to you. The one that you need to use is layer with blocks as node hierarchy. Okay, because we're utilizing layers, our boundary polylines, remember, we're on specific layers, and they're going to be used as our sort of node hierarchy, so to speak. And what that means is when they're coming in on layers as boundary polylines, we can utilize them in 3dsMax to make them into our 3D elements that form our little building in our 3D Studio Max scene. You can see there's other sort of like combinations and permutations there that you can obviously use as well. But you want to make sure that your blocks as node hierarchy is selected in case there's any blocks in there that you might be using. So it's that top one just there. Now, just underneath that, there are some interesting settings as well. You can use an extrude modifier to represent thickness. You can create one scene object for each AutoCAD architecture one. So if you're using the AutoCAD architecture toolset, for example, what you may find is that you've got different scenes in there that have been created because AutoCAD architecture works in that way too. So what you want to do there is make sure that each scene object that comes in from an AutoCAD architecture object, for example. So you can tick that box there if you need to. And you can also use scene material definitions. So there might be definitions that you want to specify in 3ds Max for this specific scene. We're not going to worry about that, but you can do that in 3ds Max if you need to. So you can tick any of these as you come down like so. So I can switch those on. You'll notice I cannot tick use extrude modifier to represent thickness. I can't do that because I'm using layers. Just be aware of that one. So once you've got all of that set up, make sure it's set to layer, blocks as node hierarchy, and you want to make sure that these three boxes below are unticked in the dialog box. So, like in previous videos, we're still with the AutoCAD DWG DXF import options dialog box. Now, you'll remember in the previous video, we talked about deriving our AutoCAD primitives, and we set it to layer blocks as node hierarchy. Now, obviously, we need to start thinking about our layers now. Now, you'll remember when we created our 3D ground floor DWG file, this one up here listed at the top of the dialog box, we set up a group of layers that were specifically 3D layers. So this is where now you've got the benefit of working in 3ds Max and the benefit of 3ds Max allowing you to choose which layers are coming through from the DWG file, obviously into the 3ds Max scene. So the good thing is now, those layers that we actually froze in the AutoCAD drawing can now be left behind. And this is where things get kind of clever. So we go to the Layers tab now in the dialog box, and you'll see at the moment that all of our layers are ticked. So all of these layers will come through regardless of whether they're frozen or not. You can see they're frozen here. All the settings are here. There's frozen and so on and so forth. So what we do is we hit none to deselect all of them, because really at the end of the day all we need is 3D floor, 3D walls external, and 3D walls internal. That's all we need. That's all we're going to be working with in our 3ds Max scene. So once we've done that, they're all in place and ready to go. So the trick there now is to think about, is there anything else that we need to set up before we import our drawing into 3ds Max? Yes, we're still in the AutoCAD DWG DXF import options dialog box. You're probably still thinking, when is he actually going to bring this drawing into 3ds Max? Well, what I'm trying to do here is to get you to make sure that you remember all the little steps and all the little nuances of 3ds Max before you hit that OK button in the dialog box. Because once you've hit OK, you've then kind of got to go all the way back to square one if there's any little error anywhere or anything you might have missed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do a quick sanity check just to make sure that everything's set the way we want it to be, and then we'll hit that OK button, and you'll see how quick and easy it is when it comes through into 3ds Max. So Geometry tab up here at the top. So Model Scale, millimeters, we don't need to rescale. Resulting model size, drawing extents at the moment not known. Derive AutoCAD primitives by layer with blocks as node hierarchy. None of these boxes need to be ticked. Everything else you can leave as is. All of those boxes there, just leave at default settings. We then go to our layers and we make sure that our three layers are selected: 3D floor, 3D walls external, 3D walls internal. Now, if I said all here like that and they're all ticked, I can actually skip all the frozen layers. So what will happen there is only the layers that are not frozen will come through, which are those three there. Now, I prefer to select layers from a list. just in case a layer has been frozen and I still want to use it. So I always go select from list, and then I go none, and then just tick the layers that I want to use, which are 3D floor, 3D walls external, 3D walls internal. Now, there is another tab, spline rendering. Let's have a look at this and see what this does. Now, all of this is all about rendering your splines, enabling them in the render, in the viewport, and so on. You don't need to worry about any of this for the project that you're working on here. However, you might want to investigate this later and perhaps go and take one of the 3dsMax courses in the library to see what all of this spline rendering is all about. So, last but not least, check you're actually bringing in the file you want to bring in. There's nothing worse than realizing you've brought the wrong file through after going through and setting all these settings. I've done it. Everybody's probably done it once in a while. And it's one of those little niggly things and you think, back to square one again. So make sure you check you've got the right drawing, the right geometry settings, the right layers, and also, if you're using spline rendering, the right settings in there too. So we are good to go. Everything is ready to go. So finally now you can hit that OK button. And as soon as you do that, there's your scene in 3dsMax. And as you can see now, you can see your walls. You can see your internal wall there as well. You can also see the openings there for the door and the window. And you can see the outer boundary there, which is our layer 3D floor. The nice thing is you can hover over any of these and you can see that there's walls external and there's also walls internal there as well. Very quick and easy, you'll notice, because we're using a very small DWG file. It would take longer to bring in a large AutoCAD 3D DWG file, for example, or a Revit 3D model. So just be aware of that. We are working with a very small file. Everything will happen really quickly. Sometimes if you're working with a much bigger file, that could take a little bit longer. So you've finally got your DWG file into 3dsMax. You can see it there. We've done the sanity checking. We've hit the OK on the dialog box, and we're now in 3dsMax and ready to go. There's one more thing you need to do. And you're probably thinking now, oh boy, what's he going to say now? Is there more work involved here? Have I done something wrong? No, you haven't. If you've got to this point, you've done everything right. The only thing you need to do now is save it as a 3dsMax scene. Now, a scene is basically a 3dsMax file, and it's a .max file, .max. And all you've got to do, and it's really quick and easy, is just hop up to File here in the corner, and you go Save As. Now, the only thing you've got to check here is the history. So you can see this is saving my 3dsMax scene to this folder path here. So just keep an eye on your history, like I said. So that's where it's going. You can change the location if you want to. It's entirely up to you. Now, all I'm going to do here is give it a similar file name to the DWG file. So it'll be 3D, and then we'll do an underscore, and then ground floor like we had before. So there it is there. So it's 3D underscore ground floor, only this time it'll have the file suffix 3D underscore ground floor dot max, as you can see there. So we're saving it as a 3dsMax scene. So once you've put that in, you simply hit save like so, and you'll notice now top left 3D ground floor dot max, and we're obviously in Autodesk 3D Studio Max 2020, and you can see everything's ready to go. We can start utilizing 3dsMax to create our 3D shell of our little building that we want to create in 3dsMax, so that we can start thinking about making it photorealistic with the rendering, the lighting, and so on. So we're ready to go. Everything's saved as a scene. You can see everything's here. You can see our layers are here on the left-hand side in our panel here, and everything is set and ready. We've got box, spear, cylinder. All of our facilities in 3dsMax are at our disposal. So, moving on to the next chapter, let's start making this into our 3D shell so that we can start utilizing the functionality and the 3D functionality, more importantly, of 3dsMax.